She had two men who loved her. One made her stomach do that ridiculous thing. You know the one. The flip, the flutter, the "where are my palms sweating, he just walked in" thing. The other one just loved her. Quietly. Completely. Without the dramatics. She chose the flutter. And it nearly cost her everything. This is not a story about a bad man. This is a story about a good woman who mistook butterflies for destiny and endurance for commitment, until the night she found herself on a bathroom floor waiting for a man who was not her husband to come and save her. There is a kind of silence that is not peaceful. It is not the silence of a Sunday morning when the whole world is still asleep and the only sound is the distant call of birds outside your window. It is not that kind of silence. This silence is the kind that sits on your chest, heavy, cold, the kind that comes after something has already broken and the world around it hasn't quite caught up yet. That was the silence in room 14B of Meridian General Hospital on a Thursday night in Lagos. The lights were low, the machines beeped steadily, that slow rhythmic sound that reminds you a heart is still working, still trying, still choosing life even when the body has been given every reason to let go. And in the chair beside the bed, not a relative, not a brother, not a husband, sat a man named Raymond. He was still wearing his work clothes. His tie was loosened, his jacket thrown over his knees like a blanket, and his two hands were wrapped around the hand of the woman lying in that bed, as if he was afraid that if he let go, she would drift somewhere he couldn't follow. He wasn't crying. Men like Raymond don't cry in public. But if you looked closely, and I mean really closely, you would see his jaw was tight in that particular way that a man's jaw gets tight when he is holding an ocean behind his eyes and refusing to let it fall. The woman in the bed was named Cynthia. She was 32 years old, and she was beautiful even now, even like this, even with the bruising near her left temple and the ivy line running into her arm, and the kind of stillness on her face that told you she had been through something that no woman, no human being should ever go through. Raymond looked at her for a long time. Then quietly, so quietly that even the machines almost didn't hear him, he said, I told you, Cynthia, but you didn't listen." He wasn't angry when he said it. He was just tired. The way you get tired when you've been right about something terrible, and being right brought you absolutely no joy at all. Now, you're probably wondering how we got here, and I promise you we will get there. But first, let me take you back. Back 3 years ago. Back to a Lagos evening in October, when the harmattan was just beginning to threaten the air with that particular dryness that cracks lips and dries skin, and a young woman named Cynthia Okeke was sitting at a rooftop bar in Victoria Island with her two best friends, sipping a cocktail she had absolutely no business drinking on a work night. And her life was still completely, wonderfully, dangerously intact. Cynthia Okeke was the kind of woman that made people look twice. Not because she was loud about it. In fact, that was the thing. She wasn't loud about anything. She didn't walk into a room announcing herself. She just arrived. And something in the temperature of the room quietly shifted. She was 29, marketing executive at a mid-sized brand agency on the island. The kind of job that sounds glamorous until you're in your 4th back-to-back meeting of the day and your client is asking you why their biscuit brand doesn't feel premium enough. And you have to smile and nod and resist the very powerful urge to say, "Sir, it's a biscuit." She had this laugh, a real laugh, the kind that started somewhere in her belly and arrived at her face before her brain had finished deciding whether it was appropriate. It made people feel like they'd won something when they caused it. She had 2 close friends, just 2, and she was proud of that number. There was Rose, her best friend since their university days at Unilag.
Rose was the kind of person who could diagnose the situation in 30 seconds flat, deliver her verdict with the precision of a surgeon, and then immediately order food because life was still going on. She had zero patience for nonsense and an extraordinary amount of patience for people she loved. She was also, as she frequently reminded everyone, hardly ever wrong. Then there was Vivian, quieter, softer, the kind of friend who didn't always have the words but was always, always there. The kind who showed up at your door with pepper soup when you are sick without being asked. Vivian noticed things. She just didn't always see them. These three women had been through university exams, heartbreaks, job losses, and at least one very ill-advised group vacation to Accra, where Vivian lost her passport and Rose somehow found a boyfriend in the airport. They were tight, the kind of tight that doesn't need daily contact to stay intact. Now, on this October evening, they were at the rooftop bar celebrating Cynthia's promotion, and Cynthia was, for the first time in a long time, genuinely, unreservedly happy. She didn't know yet that in exactly 45 minutes, someone was about to complete a picture that would change everything. Because the first piece of that picture had already arrived 3 months ago, quietly, without fanfare, the way Raymond did everything. The second piece was still on his way up the stairs. She also didn't know that one of them would become her whole world, as she didn't know that the other one would eventually be the reason she survived it. His name was Raymond Okafor. He was 31, an architect with a mid-sized firm that was slowly, very slowly but genuinely building a real reputation in Lagos. He wasn't rich by Lagos standards, not yet. He drove a clean but modest 2019 Toyota Camry that he had actually paid for himself, which in Lagos deserved some kind of certificate. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Yaba that he'd furnished with more thought than money. Raymond was steady, that's the word. In a city that ran on noise and performance and the constant pressure to appear bigger than you were, Raymond was just steady. He knew who he was. Not in an arrogant way, in the way a tree knows it's a tree, quietly, firmly, without needing anyone to confirm it. He had met Cynthia 3 months earlier at a mutual friend's birthday party. They had ended up at the same corner of the room, both pretending to check their phones to avoid a man who would not stop talking about cryptocurrency. And Cynthia had looked up and caught Raymond looking at her, and they'd both just laughed. At nothing, at everything, at the sheer absurdity of being human at a party. They talked for 2 hours that night. He asked for her number before he left. She gave it to him. Walking to her car afterwards, Cynthia turned the evening over in her mind. He's sweet, she thought. Really sweet. He's just not... She shook her head and couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't know yet that she was already making a comparison. She didn't know yet there was someone to compare him to. They'd been in that comfortable, undefined, in-between space for 3 months now, talking every day, seeing each other on weekends, Raymond always showing up, remembering the little things, checking in when she was stressed, the kind of steady, low-drama presence that felt warm and safe. But, and here is where the story gets complicated. There was no electricity, that's what Cynthia told herself. There was warmth, yes, there was comfort, there was genuine enjoyment. But that breathless, chest-tight, what is this, why are my palms doing that feeling? No. She liked Raymond, she genuinely liked Raymond. She just didn't feel Raymond. At least, that was the story she was telling herself on that October evening. And then... His name was Michael Cole. He arrived at that rooftop bar at 9:47 p.m. with 2 friends and the kind of entrance that didn't need a spotlight because he seemed to carry his own. 31 years old, investment finance, the kind of man that Lagos made, polished, well-dressed, confident in that easy, fluid way that looks effortless because he had spent years perfecting it. He wore a navy blazer over a white shirt with the first 2 buttons open, dark trousers, shoes that cost more than Cynthia's rent. Not that she noticed the shoes immediately. She noticed the smile first. It was a slow smile, the kind that starts at the corners and takes its time arriving at the eyes. And when it did arrive at the eyes, it came with this particular quality of focused attention that made you feel, for the duration of that smile, like you were the most interesting person in any room that either of you had ever been in. Cynthia Okeke, 29 years old, marketing executive, woman who prided herself on being level-headed and nobody's fool, looked at Michael Cole from across a rooftop in Victoria Island and felt her entire nervous system make a decision without consulting her brain. Glass halfway to her mouth, she thought, oh no. Rose, who was watching Cynthia's face with the same focused attention a doctor gives a patient's chart, put down her drink very slowly. Cynthia, your face? What about my face? Your face is doing something. My face is not doing anything. Your face, Rose said with great precision, is doing the thing it does when it is, in fact, doing something. I don't know what you're talking about. Vivian, is Cynthia's face doing something? Vivian, who had been minding her own business eating plantain, looked up, looked at Cynthia, looked across the bar at Michael, and looked back. I'm staying out of this. Smart woman. Michael Cole did not cross the bar immediately. He was not that type of man. He was the type of man who understood the power of being noticed before the approach. He got his drink. He laughed with his friends. He glanced over, once, in a way that said, I see you, I'm aware of you, I'm choosing to take my time. It was calculated. It was completely calculated. And it worked on Cynthia like a key in a lock. When he finally walked over, smooth, unhurried, that smile arriving ahead of him, he didn't use a line. That was the disarming part. He just looked at Cynthia and said, You look like someone who just got promoted. Cynthia blinked. How did you know that? He nodded toward the table, the small balloon Rose had insisted on bringing, the bottle of wine with a ribbon on it. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. He extended a hand. Michael Cole. Cynthia Okeke. Cynthia Okeke, he repeated, as if trying her name on for size. That's a name that belongs on something important. Rose, sitting 3 feet away and hearing every single word, picked up her cocktail and turned to look at the Lagos skyline with the focused intensity of someone who had absolutely nothing to say. But in her mind, she was thinking, God, he's good. I hate that he's good. Michael Cole entered Cynthia's life like a song you hear once and then cannot stop hearing. He called the next morning. He took her to dinner the weekend after. Not a small dinner, a real dinner, the kind with menus you have to squint at and waiters who refill your water without being asked. He sent flowers to her office on a Tuesday for no reason except that he'd been thinking about her and wanted her to know. Receiving them, card in hand, colleagues already taking pictures around her, Cynthia told herself to breathe. Just breathe. This is just breathe. He was charming in the way that only people who have studied charm can be. He was funny, genuinely funny, the kind of funny that caught you off guard. He remembered things she said in passing, he had opinions and said them confidently. He made her feel, when she was with him, like the world was larger and more interesting than it had been before he arrived. And Raymond was still there, steady, warm, consistent Raymond. He texted good morning. He remembered she had a big client presentation on Wednesday and sent her a voice note that evening. How did it go? And before you say fine, I want the real answer. He fixed a leak in her bathroom sink one Saturday morning without making it a whole story. Just showed up with tools and fixed it. And then they'd sat on her kitchen counter eating jollof rice out of the pot and talking about nothing important for 3 hours. And Cynthia, who was smart, who was not naive, who had been hurt before and promised herself she would choose better, was standing in the middle of these two men, feeling something she could not quite name. With Raymond, she felt safe. With Michael, she felt alive. And she was 29 years old, and she confused those two feelings the way only someone 29 can. The months passed. Both men had asked her out, officially, with words. Raymond had asked her on a Sunday evening on her balcony, with the last light of the day turning the sky that particular shade of orange that Lagos does in Harmattan season. He hadn't made a production of it. He just looked at her and said, "Cynthia, I think you know what I want to ask you, and I think you already know what I feel. So I'm asking properly." Michael had asked her in the back of an Uber after a night out, her head slightly resting on his shoulder, the city moving past the window. He tilted her face toward his and said, "Tell me you're not going to keep making me wait." Lying awake at 1 a.m, replaying both moments, Cynthia thought, they are both asking me the same question. Why does one feel like a harbor and the other feel like the deep sea? And why? Why am I the kind of person who wants to swim? She said yes to neither, not yet. Now, here is where I need to slow down. Because in these months, before the yes and before the wedding and before everything that came after, there were signs, small ones. The kind you could walk past and not notice if you weren't paying attention. The kind that are easy to wave away with a laugh or a logical explanation. The kind your gut registers at 3 a.m. and your heart dismisses by sunrise. The first time Cynthia noticed something, they were in a group of friends at a restaurant. Someone made a joke, a harmless joke, and Cynthia laughed and jumped in with a punchline that landed well. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Michael. He smiled, but it was a particular kind of smile, thin at the edges, not quite reaching those compelling eyes. Later, in the car on the way home, he said lightly, almost playfully, "You really do love the spotlight, don't you?" "I was just joking around." I know, he waved a hand. "It's fine. Just sometimes let other people have the floor. It's more attractive when a woman is a little restrained." He said it with a small laugh, like it was a joke, and Cynthia almost laughed too. Almost. But something very small and very quiet, shifted behind her ribs. Staring out the car window, she turned it over in her mind. He didn't mean it like that. He was joking. He was definitely joking. She paused. Was he joking? The second time was at a cookout at Vivian's place. The group was debating football, the kind of loud, chaotic, nobody is going to change their mind debate that Nigerians conduct with genuine passion. And Cynthia made a point, a good point. Raymond, who was also there, nodded and said, "She's right actually, that's exactly..." And Michael cut across him loudly, redirecting the conversation. Not rudely, not obviously rudely, just firmly, in a way that made Cynthia's point disappear from the room. Raymond noticed, Cynthia noticing Raymond. Nothing was said. The third time was at dinner alone when Cynthia mentioned she was thinking of applying for a regional marketing director role at a bigger agency. She was excited. She'd done her research. She was good enough and she knew it. Michael had listened, nodded slowly, then said, "That's a big commitment. Long hours, lot of travel. Are you sure that's what you want at this stage of your life?" "What do you mean at this stage?" He reached across the table and covered her hand, warm, reassuring, that smile. "I'm just meaning, you're a smart woman. I just want you to think about timing, about what you are building toward. There's no rush." Something was wrong with what he'd just said. She sat with it and couldn't immediately put her finger on exactly what. It sounded like concern. It was delivered like care, but it landed wrong, like a note that's just slightly flat. You might not be able to name it, but you feel it. She didn't apply for the role. She told herself it was because the timing wasn't right. 3 weeks later, she saw that a colleague had gotten the job. She thought, I should have applied. Then, almost immediately, Michael was right. It wasn't the right time. Then, after a pause long enough to be honest, was he right? Rose noticed. She brought it up one afternoon over lunch, the way Rose brought everything up, directly, without preamble, with a bottle of Fanta on the table because she was on a break from alcohol and taking it very seriously. "I don't like the way Michael talks to you sometimes." "What?" "I've been sitting on this for 2 months and I'm done sitting on it. I don't like the way he talks to you sometimes." "Rose." The restaurant thing, the career thing, the way he'll say something that sounds nice but feels wrong. You know what I'm talking about, Cynthia. I've seen your face when he says these things. Cynthia was quiet for a moment. Then she put down her fork and said, very reasonably, every man has things they need to work on. Nobody's perfect. Raymond sometimes doesn't call when he says he will. Does that make him a bad person? That's not the same thing. I'm just saying, it's not the same thing, Cynthia. Missing a call is forgetting. What Michael does is deliberate. Even when it sounds casual, there's something deliberate in it, and you know it. Silence. He makes me happy, Cynthia said finally, quietly. Rose looked at her best friend, really looked, and she saw something in Cynthia's eyes that worried her more than any argument could. It wasn't blindness. It wasn't stupidity. Cynthia was not a blind or stupid woman. It was hope. The dangerous, stubborn, irrational hope of a woman who had already decided she wanted this particular future and was now building a case for it. Rose picked up her Fanta. Okay, she said. Just that. Okay. Drinking it, she thought, she's not going to hear me. Not yet. Lord, please let her hear me. Vivian said nothing, because that's what Vivian did. She loved too quietly to push, and she trusted too much in people finding their own way. She worried, privately, at night, without telling anyone, that she should have pushed harder. As for Raymond, Raymond saw everything. He saw the way Michael subtly redirected conversations when Cynthia was the center of them. He saw the way Cynthia had started laughing a little differently around Michael. Less of that whole, unguarded belly laugh, and more of this careful, measured version, as though she was checking first whether it was appropriate. He saw small things tightening in her like a flower that wasn't getting quite enough light, but hadn't yet stopped trying. He said nothing, not because he didn't care, God knows he cared, but he understood something that took most men years to learn. You cannot love someone into a choice. You cannot argue, plead, or reason a person out of a feeling they are determined to hold. Love is not a debate. It is not won by presenting the better argument. So Raymond stayed, as a friend, warm, present, non-demanding, still bringing his real self every time. And he quietly, privately, put his heartbreak in a box and sealed the lid and kept going. Driving home alone one night, music off, the Lagos traffic crawling, he let himself think it clearly for the first time. She's going to choose him. He sat with it at a red light. I know she's going to choose him. The light changed and he pulled forward. Just be okay, Cynthia. Whatever you choose, please just be okay. She chose Michael. On a Sunday in February, the kind of Sunday where the rain came in the morning and then left, and the whole city smelled clean, and the light was soft and golden in a way that Lagos doesn't do often enough, Cynthia called Michael and said yes. Sitting in her bedroom right after she hung up, she thought, this is right. This feels right. Then, as though a quieter part of herself had something to say, stop second-guessing everything. It is right. She called Rose first. Rose said, okay, Cynthia. Not congratulations, not I'm so happy for you, just okay, Cynthia. And Cynthia heard the love in it even through the disagreement, and she loved Rose for it, and she also resented it a little, and she decided to be happy anyway. She called Raymond last. There was a pause on the line when she told him. Just a beat, barely a second, the kind of pause that most people wouldn't notice. Raymond noticed it himself. He caught it and sealed it away before it could become anything she could hear. Congratulations, Cynthia, he said, and his voice was warm and he meant every word, even while his jaw was doing that tight thing. You deserve to be happy. I mean that. Raymond, I mean it. I'm still your friend. Nothing changes that. She exhaled. Thank you. If you ever need anything, Raymond. Yes, thank you. A brief quiet, then, take care of yourself, Cynthia. He hung up and sat in his car for 15 minutes without moving. Then he started the engine and drove to his mother's house, because that was the one place in the world where he could be completely undone without having to explain it. They dated properly for 8 months.
The engagement came at 6 months. Michael went all out. Rooftop, roses, photographer hidden in the corner, the whole production. It was beautiful. Genuinely beautiful. Cynthia cried in a way she hadn't expected to, and Michael held her face in his hands and looked at her with that full, focused attention. And in that moment, he was exactly everything she had decided he was. The wedding was in November, white and gold. Church ceremony in the morning, reception at a venue on the mainland that held 400 people and played music that moved even the ushers. Michael looked like a man who had exactly what he wanted and knew it. Cynthia was radiant, really, truly radiant, in a gown that had taken 4 fittings and one near breakdown to perfect. Rose was made of honor. She wore her smile the whole day like armor and danced like she wasn't afraid of anything. Vivian cried at the vows. Raymond sent a gift, a beautiful one, and a card that said, "Wishing you both a lifetime of real happiness, the kind that holds." He didn't come to the wedding. He'd said he had an architecture project review out of town that weekend. Cynthia understood. She didn't push. There was one moment, just one, that Rose would remember later. At the reception, a young waiter had accidentally spilled a small amount of wine near Michael's chair while clearing glasses. Nothing serious, a slight stumble, quickly apologized for, the kind of thing that happens at every large event. Michael had looked up at the young man, and for just a second, not long, barely a second, his expression had been something other than the charming groom, something that had edges in it, something cold. Then the charming groom was back, waving it off, laughing, telling the waiter not to worry about it. Rose had seen it. She picked up her champagne glass and she prayed she was wrong. The first day of marriage was, by most measures, good. Not perfect, nothing is perfect, but good. They settled into a flat in Lekki that Michael had furnished entirely on his own before the wedding, which Cynthia had found romantic at the time and would only later understand differently. He had good taste. The apartment was beautiful. Cynthia tried to add a few things, a print she loved, some plants on the kitchen windowsill, a rug she'd found in a market that had real color in it. And Michael was fine with some of them, not all of them. "The rug is a bit much," he said, glancing at it. "I love it. It's a bit busy for the space. The space has a look." "I live here too, Michael." He looked at her, then smiled. "Of course you do, babe. Keep the rug." The rug stayed, but somehow, slowly, gradually, in the way that these things happen, not all at once, but one small compromise at a time, Cynthia found herself checking before she changed anything. Just checking, just being considerate. She told herself it was just consideration. She told herself that's what marriage was. Adjustment, compromise, being thoughtful about the other person.
One morning at 7 o'clock, standing in the kitchen waiting for her coffee, she caught herself thinking, "I like having plants. I'm going to get more plants. Maybe not in the living room though. Maybe just in the bedroom. He doesn't really go in there during the day." She stopped, looked at the wall, and then, with the kind of self-awareness that arrives a moment too late, when did I start thinking about where he goes? The second year was when the subtle became less subtle. The voice raising started as raised voices do, in a moment of genuine stress. Michael had had a difficult quarter at work. Cynthia understood that. The first time he raised his voice at her over something trivial, she'd asked about dinner plans in a moment when he was clearly overwhelmed, he apologized the same night. He held her and said he was sorry, that it wasn't her, that work was killing him. She held him back and said it was okay. The second time he raised his voice, the apology came in the morning. The third time, it came 2 days later. The fourth time, it wasn't really an apology. It was an explanation. "You know how I get when I'm under pressure. You should know that by now." And there is something particularly insidious about that sentence. "You should know that by now." Because it sounds like familiarity. It sounds like intimacy. It sounds like, "You know me, this is me, accept me." It takes a behavior that should never be acceptable and buries it under the language of love and time. Cynthia accepted it. She got better at reading his moods, at timing her questions, at knowing which topics to raise and which ones to set aside until the weather changed. She developed a skill, a careful, exhausting, entirely unconscious skill of navigating him. She called it being a good wife. Sometimes, choosing not to raise something, a bill he'd forgotten for the third time, an appointment he'd missed, she'd stand at the sink with the water running and tell herself, "It's fine, I'll handle it. Happy home, happy life." And then a thought would slip through that she didn't invite, sharp and clear. "I am so tired." It was gone before she could hold it. She'd replace it immediately. This is a difficult patch. Every marriage has this. Rose noticed the change in Cynthia. Not anything she could point to directly, not yet. Just a quality of something slightly dimmed, like the volume of Cynthia had been turned down just a notch. The laugh that used to arrive without permission now arrived with slightly more permission being asked first. She brought it up once, carefully. Cynthia smiled and said, "Marriage is adjustment, Rose. You'll understand when you are married." And Rose, who had been happily unmarried and unbothered for 29 years, looked at her best friend and decided that the worst thing she could do right now was fight. She stayed close instead. That was the right decision. By the middle of their second year, Michael was coming home late 3 to 4 nights a week. He always had an explanation. Work, networking, a client dinner, drinks with colleagues. He was in finance. The hours were real. The demands were real. Cynthia knew this. She told herself she knew this. But there is a difference between a husband who comes home late because the world requires it of him and a husband who comes home late and when he walks through the door, doesn't quite meet your eyes, doesn't ask how your evening was, gets to his phone before he gets to you. The first time she asked, lightly, carefully, in the way she'd learned to ask things, he deflected with ease. Work, always work, very demanding quarter, you know how it is. The second time she asked, he was less light about it. "I just walked through the door, Cynthia. Can I breathe? I just wanted to know if I said I was working. Do you want me to send you my schedule? Should I copy you on my emails?" She backed down. Lying awake that night while Michael slept beside her, she talked herself through it. He's right. I shouldn't have come at him the moment he walked in. Bad timing. I should have waited. But then the other thought, the one she kept trying to close the door on, I've been awake since 10, wondering where he was. And then completing the loop back to where she started. But he's right. I should have waited. Here is the thing about living with someone who slowly rewrites your sense of reality. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in 1,000 small moments, 1,000 small recalibrations, until one day you are lying in the dark explaining to yourself why your own instincts are wrong and you don't even notice you've been doing it for months. The first time Michael put his hands on Cynthia, it was a grip. She had been trying to leave the room during an argument, one of those that had escalated faster than she could track, starting with him being dismissive about her work and somehow becoming a full confrontation. And she said, "I don't want to do this right now. I need a minute." He grabbed her arm hard, fingers that dug in, and he said, very quietly, very close to her face, "We're not done." She looked at him. For a moment, just a moment, she did not recognize him. The man in front of her was wearing Michael's face and Michael's clothes, but the thing looking back at her from his eyes was something she didn't have a name for yet. He let go, stepped back, ran a hand over his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "Cynthia, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to walk away again. We never finished our conversations and He stopped. "I'm sorry. That was wrong." She stood there looking at the red marks forming on her arm, and then he pulled her close and held her, and she was shaking, and he rubbed her back and said he was sorry, he was so sorry, he would never. She believed him. That night, in the bathroom mirror, looking at the bruise coming up on her arm, she made herself a promise that she packaged as a prediction. It was an argument. It got out of hand. He said sorry. He's never done that before. It won't happen again. It happened again. Of course, it happened again. She was becoming an expert in a skill no woman should ever have to develop. The marks started needing concealer. Women who have lived this develop a precision that is heartbreaking, the right shade, the right coverage, the right technique for different parts of the body. Cynthia learned it without being taught. She wore long sleeves to a work event in August. Vivian was there. Vivian looked at those long sleeves in the Lagos heat and something moved across her face. A thought, a question she was almost brave enough to ask. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The moment passed. Driving home alone that night, Vivian turned it over and over. I should have said something. She would have denied it. She would have been angry. I'll talk to Rose. I'll tell Rose. But what if I'm wrong? What if I don't know for sure? She stopped at a red light. The light changed. I should have said something. The isolation was gradual. Cynthia found herself prancing on Rose more often. Small reasons. Tired. Michael had plans. She wasn't feeling well. Rose pushed back each time, but Cynthia had become frighteningly good at the performance. She had learned to laugh at the right volume, to answer questions at the right depth, to say, "We're fine," in a tone that closed the topic like a door being gently shut. Getting off the phone with Rose one evening, she told herself, I'll go see her next week. I'll make sure there's nothing to see before I go. She stood at the kitchen counter with the phone in her hand, and something pierced through all of it for just a moment. A thought so honest it hurt. I cannot believe this is my life. Then immediately, reflexively, this is not my life. This is a difficult patch. Every marriage has this. Rose said later that the thing that frightened her most wasn't the excuses. It was the time Cynthia was too cheerful, artificially, effortfully cheerful, the kind that takes work. Normal people, Rose would say, sitting in a hospital waiting room months later, don't have to work at being fine. It was a Thursday. Michael had been out since mid-afternoon. No messages, then brief messages, then nothing. Cynthia had eaten alone, cleaned up alone, sat on the couch with a book she wasn't reading, watching the door, watching her phone, doing the mental arithmetic of his location she'd become an expert at. How long it takes from Victoria Island, whether traffic would be bad, whether to call or whether calling would make things worse when he got home. He came home at 11. She could tell from the sound of the door how the night was going to go. She had learned to read his arrivals like weather. There was the normal night door, the "it was a good day" door. There was the late night and knows it door. This door, this particular Thursday door, was none of those. This door was heavy. She stood up from the couch. He walked in and she could see immediately that something had gone wrong somewhere in his evening, in his business, in his pride, in some part of his world that had nothing to do with her. And he was bringing it home the way he always did now, in his jaw, in his shoulders, in his eyes. She should have been quiet. She knew she should have been quiet. She had learnt this lesson too many times. But she was tired. Months of exhausted, carefully managed, constantly vigilant tired. And something in her, some last piece of herself that hadn't yet been worn down, made her speak. "Where have you been, Michael?" He stopped, turned slowly. "I called you at 9. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. Don't. I am your wife. I said don't." The arguments that followed happened fast, the way they always did now, escalating with the speed of something that had been building pressure for months and had learned the shortest route between calm and detonation. She tried to walk away. She had learned that walking away was safer, that removing herself was the only de-escalation available to her. He didn't let her walk away. What happened next, what she would spend months afterward slowly allowing herself to remember clearly, was the worst it had ever been. He hit her. This time, it was worse. She would later describe it to her therapist in a voice so even and controlled that the therapist understood the evenness itself was a survival mechanism. She would describe him hitting her falling, him leaving the house before she had fully gathered herself from the floor. When the front door slammed, the apartment went silent. She sat on the bathroom floor. She sat there for a long time, the kind of long that doesn't have minutes in it. And then her phone rang. She looked at the screen through the blur of everything. Raymond. Her thumb hovered. Don't pick up, she thought. Don't pick up. If you pick up, he will hear it in your voice. He will know. Don't. She picked up. "Hey," Raymond's voice, warm, completely normal, the most normal sound she had heard in months. I know it's late. I was just thinking about Cynthia. She hadn't said anything. She hadn't meant to make a sound. Cynthia, are you there? Yeah, too small, too broken at the edges. She cleared her throat. Yeah, I'm here. Silence on the line. Then Raymond said, very carefully, very quietly, what happened? Not a question, a statement, because he knew her voice better than she'd realized she'd let him. Nothing, I'm fine, I'm just... Cynthia, his voice was still quiet, but had shifted, something direct in it, immovable. What happened? She had the denial ready. She'd used it on her mother, on Rose, on Vivian, on herself. She had this denial so well rehearsed, she could deliver it in her sleep. But it was late, and she was on the bathroom floor, and she was tired in a way that went all the way down to the bone. And it was Raymond.
The first sound that came out of her was not words. He heard it. I'm coming, he said. Raymond, you don't have to. I'm coming, Cynthia. What's the address? Not a question. She gave him the address, and she sat on that bathroom floor and she waited. I want you to stay with this moment, because in this moment, a woman on a bathroom floor and a man in a car driving toward her across the city, something that had been going in one terrible direction for a very long time, begins quietly to turn. Stay with us. Raymond arrived in 18 minutes. Cynthia had unlocked the gate remotely. She'd stood up from the bathroom floor. She looked in the mirror and had a single, clear, devastating thought. I have to stop hiding this. She opened the apartment door before he knocked. He stood there, still in his work clothes, the tie still on, no jacket, and he looked at her for exactly 2 seconds and said nothing. He just moved forward and put his arms around her carefully, so carefully, like someone holding something that had already been broken too many times, and she stood there. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She was somewhere on the other side of crying. He drove her to the hospital himself, quiet in the car, no interrogation, no questions she wasn't ready for. No, I told you so, that he had earned 1,000 times over. Just the road, the city at midnight, and the quiet dignity of a man who was exactly who he had always been. At the hospital, while they waited, he sat beside her and said one thing. You are not going back. She looked at him. Her face was complicated. Cynthia, you are not going back. Raymond, I'm not asking. I'm telling you what I see. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking at the floor. I've been watching this for 2 years, and He stopped, collected himself. I'm not going to watch it happen anymore. Whatever you need, a place to stay, money, someone to sit with you while you figure it out, I'm here. But you are not going back to that house tonight. She didn't go back that night. She went to Rose's. When Rose opened her door at 2 a.m. and saw Cynthia standing there, she didn't say a single word about being right. She pulled her inside. She made tea that neither of them drank, and they sat on Rose's couch. And Cynthia, finally, with the particular collapse of someone who has been holding a weight for so long that setting it down is a physical act, told Rose everything. All of it, from the beginning. Rose listened without interrupting, without reacting loudly, with the fierce, present attention of someone who loves you. When Cynthia finished, Rose was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Okay, here's what we're doing. Not, I can't believe you. Not, why didn't you tell me? Not, do you know how worried I've been? Just, here's what we're doing. And Cynthia, for the first time in what felt like years, felt someone else hold the map for a few minutes. She closed her eyes and slept. Michael called 7 times that night, 14 times the next day. On the 3rd day, he came to Rose's building. Rose met him in the lobby. What happened in that lobby, the conversation between Rose and Michael Cole, is something Rose has never described in full detail. What she has said is this. He started charming, then confused, then apologetic in a way that sounded rehearsed. Then, when none of that worked, when Rose looked at him with the steady, unimpressed gaze of a woman who had seen through him from the beginning, something else appeared in his eyes, something that confirmed everything. Just let me talk to her, he said finally. No. Rose said. He left. Now, you might be expecting what comes next to be Cynthia walking away cleanly, closing the chapter, beginning the healing. That's not what happened. What happened was that Cynthia went back. Not immediately.
Not without a fight from Rose and Vivian and several very direct conversations. But 6 weeks after that Thursday night, after Michael had written letters, sent flowers, shown up twice with his mother and cried in front of Cynthia in a way she had never seen him cry, and after he said the things she had always needed to hear, she packed a bag at Rosie's apartment and went back. She stood in Rosie's doorway sorting through her things, and the argument she made to herself was thorough and well organized. He is not the same man. People change. I changed. He can change. He's still my husband. Marriage is for better, for worse. Everyone says leave, leave, leave. But where is the endurance? Where is the commitment? My mother was married for 32 years. It was not all smooth. She paused at that last one. It was not all smooth. Then, much more quietly, they thought she'd been settling for years. She never talked about what that meant. Rose stood in the doorway and watched her pack and said nothing, because Rose was smart enough to know that some lessons cannot be taught. They can only be survived. For 3 months after Cynthia went back, things were different. Michael was attentive, considerate. He was home on time. He asked about her work with genuine interest. He did not raise his voice. He was the man she had fallen in love with on that rooftop in Victoria Island, and she let herself believe that this was the real version of him returning, that the other version had been the aberration. On a Sunday morning, making breakfast while Michael read a newspaper and the apartment felt peaceful, Cynthia let herself lean into it. See, she thought, this is what it is. This is who he is. Everything else was a storm. Storms pass. And then she got pregnant. She found out on a Wednesday evening in March. A test in the bathroom, hands shaking for a completely different reason than they'd ever shaken in that bathroom before. 2 lines. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and put her hand over her mouth, and she felt something enormous move through her. She called Michael before she even called Rose. He came home that night with champagne and groceries, and he cooked, badly, with great enthusiasm and no real skill. And they sat on the kitchen floor at midnight eating imperfect jollof rice and laughing, genuinely laughing. And Cynthia thought, this is it. This is the thing that cements it. A baby changes everything. A baby will. Later, lying in the dark, a thought she'd quickly folded away. A baby will hold us together. Is that a reason to have a child? Is that... Then, family, folding faster. Stop it. We wanted a family. We always talked about a family. This is good. This is right. They argued about the name immediately, happily, loudly, the way young parents argue about names. Michael wanted something strong. Cynthia wanted something that sounded like hope. She chose Amara. It means grace. Michael agreed eventually, laughing. Amara Cole. Okay, I like it. She was 12 weeks when the first indication came that the 3 months of peace had been a season, not a permanent change in climate. He came home one Friday and she could tell, before he'd even put down his keys, the way she'd always been able to tell, that something had gone wrong in his world. She was 14 weeks pregnant. She made the mistake of asking. Not a bad question, a concerned question. A wife asking her husband what was wrong. The kind of question that in a healthy home leads to 2 people sitting together with the problem between them. But they were not in that home. The argument started in the kitchen. It moved to the hallway. It escalated in the way she'd almost forgotten, almost convinced herself was behind them. And something broke, something she couldn't name, the final thread of a patience she thought was infinite. What happened in that hallway on that Friday night is the event in this story that I will not describe to you in detail. Not because you can't handle it, but because some things carry more weight in the space after them than in the telling of them. What I will tell you is this. He left the house. Cynthia sat on the hallway floor. She was not sure how long. Then she called for help. She was rushed to a hospital. And when she came out on the other side of what the doctors gently called a complication, she looked at the face of the doctor before she asked the question, and his face answered her before his words did. There was no more Amara. There is a particular quality of grief that comes from losing something already loved, already named, already spoken into the future. It lives in the body differently, in the arms especially, in the specific weight of empty arms, and it doesn't announce itself on a schedule. It arrives when it wants, in the grocery store, at a red light, in the middle of a sentence about something else entirely. Cynthia lay in that hospital room for 3 days. Her mother came and held her without saying anything about endurance or commitment, just held her. And that was the most honest thing Mrs. Okeke had offered her daughter in years. Rose came and stayed overnight. Vivian brought food that Cynthia couldn't eat. Raymond came on the second day. He sat beside her bed and looked at her with the full weight of everything he knew, and everything he felt, and everything he had never said. And he said the only true thing available. "I'm sorry, Cynthia. I'm so sorry." She didn't cry. She was going to cry later, weeks later, months later, in waves that would arrive without warning. But in that moment, she just looked at Raymond Okafor, and something in her that had been in a long and terrible argument with itself finally went quiet. Michael did not come to the hospital. He sent a long message that used the word sorry 4 times and the word but 3 times, and somehow managed to contain both an apology and a justification for why the situation was more complicated than it appeared. Rose read it, put the phone face down on the bedside table, looked at Cynthia. "I know," Cynthia said. "I haven't said anything." "I know." Silence. "I'm leaving," Cynthia said. Rose nodded. Not finally, not I knew it, just a nod. "Okay," Rose said. "Tell me what you need." Leaving a marriage is not a single moment. This is the thing they don't tell you. In the movies, it happens in one scene, a packed bag, a door closing, a dramatic soundtrack. In real life, it is 100 small moments spread over weeks. It is lawyers and paperwork and phone calls you don't want to make. It is the particular indignity of having to explain yourself to people who love you and people who don't. It is going back to the apartment once to collect the things that are yours, Rose at the door, a security guard present, and seeing the rug you chose still on the floor and having to decide whether to take it. She took it. It is finding your old independence somewhere inside yourself and discovering it smaller than you remembered, a little damaged, a little uncertain, but still there, still breathing. Michael helped. He had a studio apartment, a friend's place, empty, available, and he paid the first 3 months' rent before Cynthia even knew he'd done it. When she found out and called him, furious, ready to refuse, he said, "Cynthia, let me help you. You can pay me back. You can shout at me later. Right now, just let me help you." She let him help her. He didn't press. He didn't make her feel indebted. He brought food sometimes, the kind that required no explanation, just left at the door with a message that said simply, "Eat something." He helped her find a therapist, a real one, good, someone who understood what Cynthia had been through and did not rush the process. He sat in a waiting room during one lawyer's meeting when she asked, because the idea of going in alone made her feel like the walls were moving. He sat there reading a magazine about interior design trends and didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Sitting in that waiting room, pretending to read about kitchen renovation ideas, Raymond ran the same thought on a loop. She's going to be okay. She just needs time and she's going to be okay. He put the magazine down, picked it back up. She's going to be okay. The months that followed were not linear. Some days, Cynthia woke up and felt cautiously like herself. She returned to work. Her colleagues welcomed her with a slightly too bright cheerfulness of people who knew something had happened and didn't know what to do with it. And she let them have their brightness because she was too tired to manage their discomfort and her own at the same time. Some days, she could not get off the bathroom floor. Her therapist, Dr. Zara, a small, sharp-eyed woman who did not trade in soft platitudes, helped her understand something that took months to truly land. You didn't miss the signs because you are foolish. You missed them because you are human. And because you are taught that love is something you endure rather than something you inhabit. Those are two very different things. Sitting in that office looking at her hands, Cynthia said quietly, "My mother used to say that a good woman is one who can keep a home together no matter what." A pause. I wonder if my mother was okay. She called her mother that evening and asked a question she'd never asked before. Her mother was quiet for a very long time. What she said in that silence is between them. But the next time Cynthia went home for a visit, her mother held her longer than usual when she arrived. And Mrs. Okeke, 61 years old, began her own conversations about her own marriage, about the things she had modeled without meaning to, about the difference between commitment and suffering, which she had never been clearly taught herself and was learning now, slowly, that these things are never too late. Cynthia ran into Raymond on a Saturday morning at a small bakery in Surulere. Not planned, a genuine coincidence, the kind that in a city of 20 million people is either remarkably unlikely or, depending on what you believe, not a coincidence at all. They both reached for the same type of bread at the same moment, his hand, her hand, the bread between them. They looked at each other, and then they both started laughing, the ridiculous, pure, uncomplicated kind that doesn't need a reason. This was the same Raymond who had sat beside her hospital bed, the same Raymond who had paid rent before she could refuse, the same Raymond who had held her on a Thursday night at midnight and driven through Lagos to get to her, the same man who had, very quietly and without ever demanding credit for it, refused to leave even when she'd given him every reason to. "Take it," he said, holding out the bread. "You take it. You take it. We could split it. We could split it," he agreed. They sat outside with coffee and torn bread and talked for 2.5 hours. His architecture firm, which had just landed a significant project, her new role at work, smaller than before her leave, but she was building back. Rose's chaotic love life, ongoing and spectacular. Vivian's new pregnancy, happy news, the kind that felt like permission to hope again. It was the most like herself that Cynthia had felt in longer than she could accurately measure. When they stood to leave, Raymond put his hands in his pockets and looked at the street and said, "I'm glad you're okay, Cynthia. I'm getting there." "I know." A pause. "That's the same thing." She looked at him. He smiled, that quiet, unhurried smile. No performance in it, no calculation. And she felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost stopped looking for it. Not the electric, chest-tight, "what is wrong with my nervous system" feeling from the rooftop bar 3 years ago. Something different. Something that felt less like falling and more like arriving. It was Rose who cracked the last of it open. Cynthia had been at Rose's one Friday evening, wine, music, the comfortable ease of people who have survived enough together that silence between them feels like a warm room. And Cynthia had been talking, carefully circling, about Raymond, about the bakery, about how she felt and how wrong it felt to feel it, about how she treated him, dismissed what he offered, failed to see. Rose set down her wine glass. "Can I say something?" "You are going to say it regardless." "True." Rose looked at her. "Cynthia, Raymond Okafor has loved you with the same quality of love for 3 years. Not the love that arrives like fireworks and burns itself out. The love that shows up on a Thursday night at midnight and takes you to the hospital. The love that doesn't ask for a receipt. The love that is there after everything." She paused. "You spent 3 years experiencing that love and calling it not enough." Cynthia was quiet. "I'm not saying it to judge you," Rose continued. "I'm saying it because I think you know it now. And the only reason you're sitting here making a case against yourself is because you're scared. Being scared is reasonable, but it is not the same as it being wrong." Cynthia sat with that for a long time. What if I've broken it, she thought. What if I used up whatever Raymond had? What if I'm too much now, too broken, too complicated, too heavy? What if he sees me clearly now and I am not what he thought I was? Then, slowly, he's already seen me on a bathroom floor. He's already seen all of it. A pause. And he showed up anyway. 1 year after Cynthia signed the final papers, exactly 3 years after a rooftop in Victoria Island where 2 men walked into her life, Michael Cole appeared at her apartment building. Not aggressively. He was the other version of himself, the version from the beginning, the version that still lived in some part of her memory like a song she hadn't fully unlearned. He was thinner. He looked like a man who had, in the space of a year, encountered himself and not entirely survived the meeting. He stood at her door and said, "I know I have no right to be here. I know that. I just needed to see you. I needed to say sorry. Not the sorry from the messages, a real one. I've been getting help. I have a therapist. He stopped, swallowed. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know that." Cynthia stood in her doorway and looked at him. And here is the truth, the honest, complicated, fully human truth that I am not going to dress up or simplify for you. A part of her felt something, not love, not the desire to go back, but something. The ghost of a version of this that had been real to her, the ache of a future that had been planned and named and lost, the particular sadness of looking at someone who might have been different and wasn't, and knowing that might have been is one of the cruelest distances in the English language. She stood in that doorway for a moment that felt longer than it was, and then she said, "I'm glad you're getting help, Michael. I mean that." Her voice was steady. It surprised her how steady it was. "I hope you become the man you could have been. I genuinely do. But that man is not for me. And I am not standing here for this. Not today, not any day." He nodded. He didn't fight it. Maybe the therapy was real. Maybe something in him had genuinely shifted. Maybe the version of him standing there was, finally, different. It didn't matter. She closed the door. She stood with her back against it for 30 seconds, then she genuinely checked herself, the way Dr. Zara had taught her to. "I'm okay," she thought. "I'm okay. She was actually okay. She called Raymond. He came over. He sat on her couch and she told him what had happened, and he listened, steady, present Raymond. And when she was done, he said, "Are you okay?" And she said, Yeah, I actually am." He nodded. And then, with the care of a man who had spent years being careful about this, who had asked once and never pushed, who had been present without demanding that his presence be acknowledged, he said, "Can I tell you something?" "Okay." "I have been in love with you since the night we were both hiding from the cryptocurrency man at a birthday party in Ikoyi." She laughed, the real laugh, the belly one that didn't ask permission. He watched her laugh with the expression of a man who had been cold for a very long time and has just sat down next to a fire. Raymond. He was all in her eyes, and this time she was ready for it. "I know the timing is..." "Raymond," she turned to face him properly. "Stop apologizing for the timing." A pause. "Okay," he said. "I treated you badly." She said it directly, without flinching. "I want you to know that I know that. I didn't value what you were offering because I couldn't see it clearly. I was looking for something that felt like danger and calling it passion." She looked at him. "But I know who you are. I know who you've been this entire time, and I know who I am now. Not the version trying to make something work out of stubbornness or fear or some idea about what marriage was supposed to look like, but me, actually me." Raymond looked at her. "So, I'm asking you, if you still want this, give me the chance to do this correctly, to choose with my eyes open." The apartment was quiet. Raymond looked at her and saw what he'd always seen in her when she was fully present. And this time, there was nothing obscuring it. No competing pull, no unfinished business, no hope aimed in the wrong direction. He said, "Cynthia Okiki, I have been waiting, patiently I might add, at significant personal cost, for you to ask me that question for 3 years. Is that a yes?" That is a very enthusiastic yes. Now, I could end this story with a wedding, a Lagos sunset, a fast forward to a happy future with matching outfits and a beautiful home. But that would be a disservice to you, and it would be a disservice to Cynthia. Because healing is not a destination, it is a practice. It is the daily choice to know your own value in a world that will sometimes tell you your value is contingent on your endurance, on how much you can take, on how long you can stay. Cynthia and Raymond have a story ahead of them. It will have hard days in it because all real things do. Raymond is not perfect. Cynthia is not perfect. But they are beginning with something that most love stories skip entirely. Honesty. Full, costly, eyes-open honesty. And Michael Cole? He is somewhere in this city rebuilding himself. Whether he succeeds, whether the man who stood at her door was a real turn or another performance, only time will answer that. And that answer belongs to his story now, not this one. Vivian had her baby, a girl. She named her Cynthia. And when she found out, the real Cynthia cried for a very long time. Now, think about this. For better, for worse was never meant to be a sentence that ends with you on a bathroom floor, hiding your wounds from the people who love you. For better, for worse is for two people who have chosen each other fully and who, in the hard seasons, face the world together. Not one person facing the other. And to every man listening tonight, this one is for you. There is a weight that comes with being a man in this world. The pressure to perform, to provide, to hold things together even when things are falling apart. That weight is real. Nobody is dismissing it. But there is a door in your home. And on one side of that door is everything the world threw at you that day. The failed deal, the difficult boss, the pride that took a hit, the frustration that has nowhere clean to land. And on the other side of that door is a person who chose you, who is waiting for you, who had their own difficult day and said nothing yet because they were waiting to share it with you. The moment you walk through that door, what you carry and how you carry it becomes a choice. You do not have to pretend the weight isn't there. You do not have to perform strength you don't feel. Talk, share. That is not weakness. That is what the person on the other side of that door is there for. But transferring the weight onto them through silence that suffocates, through a tone that cuts, through hands that should never be raised, that is not carrying your burden. That is making them carry it for you. And that is never what love agreed to. Now, to all Echoes of Wisdom family, look at the people around you. Not the ones who show up when you are winning. Anybody can do that. Do you have a Rose who will meet you at the door at 2 a.m. without a single "I told you so"? A Raymond who drives across the city at midnight without being asked twice? A Vivian who notices something is wrong even when you say nothing? Or are the people in your circle just people, and you'd struggle to point out what you genuinely mean to each other? Real friendship is not decoration. It is the thing that keeps you alive in your worst season. Those people are rare, and if you have them, you already know who they are. Keep them. Show up for them the way they show up for you. That is how life should be. And to everyone who has been through your own version of this story and quietly decided you are done with love, I won't argue with you. I'll only say this. Cynthia's second chapter wasn't guaranteed either. Sometimes the best thing you can do is choose yourself so completely, so firmly, so without apology, that when something real finally arrives, you are whole enough to recognize it. And if it never arrives, you are still whole. That is not a consolation. That is the point. But before we go, I want to ask you something. If you were standing where Cynthia stood, on that rooftop, in that October evening, with these two men on either side of your life, would you have chosen the one you loved deeply, or the one who loved you more than you loved them? There is no right answer. People have chosen both and built something beautiful. People have chosen both and been broken by it. Love does not come with a formula. But I'm curious about you. Drop it in the comments. Would you choose the one your heart ran towards, or the one who never stopped running towards you? Tell me. And remember to share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have lived any version of this story, you are not alone. You never were.